Good morning, second grade. This is Mrs. No, but we're not doing spelling words today. Um, well, we will, but what this video is literature, and I'm so excited to be teaching literature this week because I love reading, and that's why I like teaching you how to read and helping you read and write better, because I love reading. All you have to do to go to a new place is open a book. So I'm so excited to be sharing the story that I'll be sharing with you this week. So remember, if you saw on Canvas, I didn't put it up till Friday, but our story that we're doing this week, who knows what kind of flower this is? Right, it's a rose. Well, a rose is going to play a major role in the story that we're talking about this week. But before I start our story, so you can just, I wonder what it is. Maybe you know, maybe you have some thoughts. But before we get to our story, we're going to do a poem. I love poems as well, so I'm excited to share this poem with you. And this poem has 4 stanzas in it. Remember, a stanza is just a chunk of a poem, and there's a blank line in between our stanzas. And since we have 4 school days this week, we're going to learn 1 stanza each day, and then by the end of the week, we'll have a poem that we know. So first, I'm going to read the poem to you. This poem is by Robert Louis Stevenson. Does that name sound familiar to you? If we've been listening to the announcements and paying attention, Mrs. Hillock read a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson a couple of weeks ago. That was our poem of the week. Remember, it was called Bed in Summer. And that one is also by Robert Louis Stevenson. So Robert Louis Stevenson is, he was an author who was born in Scotland. Right? And so that's way over by England, so across the Atlantic Ocean. And so of course the language he wrote in was English, since he was born in Scotland. And he wrote, he wrote a book called Treasure Island that I believe you'll read in 4th grade. But he also wrote a wonderful book of poems. And so the poem that I'm going to be sharing with you and that we're going to be memorizing this week comes from that book. All right, our poem is Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. So I'm going to just read it to you and I want you to just listen first. Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. Dark brown is the river, golden is the sand. It flows along forever with trees on either hand. Green leaves a-floating, castles of the foam, boats of mine a-boating, where will all come home? On goes the river, and out past the mill, away down the valley, away down the hill, away down the river, 100 miles or more. Other little children shall bring my boats ashore. He's talking about his boats. I wonder, what kind of boats would a child have? I think he's talking about this kind of a boat. I don't know if you know, but you can make a boat from paper. And if you make a paper boat, you can put it on water and it will float. So I want you to read the poem again. I want you to be thinking about what the character is doing, all right, if he has boats. All right, Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. Dark brown is the river, golden is the sand. It flows along forever with trees on either hand. Green leaves a-floating, castles of the foam, boats of mine a-boating, where will all come home? On goes the river and out past the mill, away down the valley, away down the hill, away down the river, 100 miles or more. Other little children shall bring my boats ashore. So when I hear this poem, I think of Robert Louis Stevenson, and he's making boats and he's putting them on a river. Now, a river flows one way, right? It flows out towards a larger body of water. So he put the boats in the river and they go away from him. And he doesn't know what happens to them. He doesn't know if they're found, if they make it all the way out to the sea, if they come near the bank of the river and other children are able to pick them up and have them. So that's what I think of when I think of this poem, Where Go the Boats? He's setting his boats out, but he doesn't quite know what's going to happen to them. Sounds like at the end he hopes that other children find them and have the boats. All right, so let's learn the first stanza of our poem. So I'll say it, the name and the author first, and then we'll say it together. Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. Say that with me. Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. All right, and we're going to use some hand motions because that's going to help us remember the poem better if we're using more of our senses. All right. Dark brown is the river. Say that with me. Dark brown is the river. Golden is the sand. All right, say that with me. Golden is the sand. It flows along forever, flows along forever, with trees on either hand. All right, let's try that together. Dark brown is the river. Golden is the sand. It flows along forever, with trees on either hand. All right, let's do that one more time. What's our poem, class? Good. Where Go the Boats by Robert Louis Stevenson. Dark brown is the river, golden is the sand. It flows along forever with trees on either hand. All right, we'll keep memorizing one stanza each day, and then by the end of the week, we'll have this poem and we can keep it here forever. All right, class, so before we begin our story, I wanted to put up some words that we might come across in the story. Well, we will come across these words in the story, and I thought some of them you might not know, so I wanted to tell you what they mean before we start our story. And I grouped them into our nouns and verbs and adjectives in how they're used as the story. All right, the first one is merchant. A merchant, that's a person who buys things and then sells them to other people. So we don't have this as much nowadays because we have grocery stores and there are big companies that do this instead of people. But back in the day before there were huge grocery stores, there would be people who would go and get goods from other countries often, and then they'd bring them back on ships and sell them. So a merchant is someone who does that, and it could be fabric, it could be grain, it could be all kinds of different things. But a merchant is someone who goes and gets things from far away and then sells them. All right, our next one is peasants. So peasants, at the time the story was written, would be people who weren't wealthy. They might have had to farm and they might have had to work really hard instead of having a lot of money already and not needing to work. So those are peasants. It means people who aren't wealthy and who have to work. All right, the next one you might know, and that is spoiled. Let's see, if food is spoiled, can you eat it anymore? You can't, no, so you might have a spoiled orange that has mold on it or something else like that. So if something's spoiled, that means it's ruined and you can't use it anymore. All right, our next word, we've got some adjectives. Remember, those are our descriptive words. Sumptuous. Ooh, sumptuous. If you're about to have a sumptuous meal, it's really rich, maybe it's really beautiful as well, and very luxurious. So sumptuous means just really delicious, really, really rich, really fancy would be something that is sumptuous. All right, next is magnificent. If something is magnificent, it's also generally really fancy, really beautiful, depending on what it is. If someone has a magnificent dress, it's probably very beautiful and maybe costly, right? So that's magnificent. So sumptuous and magnificent are both describing things that are fancy. All right, our next one, let's see, we're going in the order that will come across these words in our story. The next one is ingratitude. All right, if we know what gratitude is, we know that ingratitude is just going to be the opposite. So does anyone know what gratitude is? Right, gratitude is like when you're grateful for something. So if someone gives you something and you say, "Oh, thank you," or you realize that they put a lot of effort into giving you that thing or whatever it is, and you're thankful, you recognize their work, you have gratitude. Well, if you have ingratitude, that means you're not grateful for what you get. So someone might give you something and you don't care about it and don't even say thank you, don't think about what they did to get you that thing. So that's ingratitude. All right, our next one. All right, this is a descriptive word, right? Because we're at our adjectives, is somber. If someone or something is somber, it's very serious. There's not going to be laughing or joking or having fun. You're just serious and maybe kind of sad too. That is something that is somber. All right, our next word is resolve. Right, so this, when we're using it in the way it's used in the story, you're talking about a person's resolve. So that means the person is committed to doing something. So if I say, I have resolve that we will learn how to write sentences beautifully, it means I'm committed to that and I'm not going to quit until we do it. So that is resolve. You're committed to doing something. All right, our last word is dissuade. Dissuade. If you try to dissuade someone from doing something, you talk them out of it, or you try and talk them out of it. Right, so you might try and dissuade your younger brother or sister from taking your toys. So dissuade means try to convince them not to. All right, well, those are the words that we'll be hearing in our story today. Before I start our story and we find out what this rose is all about, I want to tell you a little bit about the person who originally wrote this story. It was a lady, which I think is really neat because we don't have a lot of stories that were written by ladies. It's back in the day, people didn't always think that women could be good writers, and so they couldn't get published and their stories weren't always famous and well known. So I think it's pretty neat that our story today is written by a lady. So the lady who wrote our story, her name is Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau, and she lived in France. So the story was originally written in a different language. It was written in French first. And the story was published in 1750. Oh my, we know the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. So this story was written and published before the United States even had independence. So that was a long time ago. It was actually 270 years ago was how long ago our story was written. All right, our story, let's see, is a fairy tale. So you may remember from last year when you did Cinderella or when you read Cinderella and different versions of Cinderella, a fairy tale sometimes is written. Different people will write a new version of it, and sometimes they change a few details and things might sound a little different. So we're actually going to hear two different versions of this story this week. And when we're hearing the second one, I want you to be thinking about, how is this different from the first one? All right, so our story is Beauty and the Beast. Now, some of you might know a movie of Beauty and the Beast. I'm going to warn you though, there are some pretty big differences between the movie and our book. All right. So don't be just thinking about the movie. I want us to be listening to the book. All right, so our story that has our rose in it is Beauty and the Beast. This is the first version we're going to be reading. All right, and this one, remember I said fairy tales are often kind of rewritten, so this one is retold. That means they took the story and put their own words to it, retold and illustrated by Jan Brett. And she is an author and illustrator that I really like. So I got this book just to share it with you because I think the pictures are beautiful. All right, so I'm going to make a separate video of me reading the first part of the book so that you can see the pictures really well.